Well. If there was one moment I got back into the game, then I guess this would be it. Welcome to City Skylines II. First things, is Otsuki dead? I don't know yet. For now, I'm not going to be working on Otsuki most likely because it's just too much time and effort to get it to work and to get it to run because it's so heavily modded and it takes a lot of time most of the time to recover the save game when I want to get back into it, and then by the time I can actually get back into playing the game, usually I already will have, I want to make music again or something like that. So just playing vanilla would be easier to do because then I can just start the game, play, record some stuff, and I'm done. And that's much easier to do. So I might bring Otsuki back in the future, but then in City Skylines 2. So as Japanese assets will be made and released, I might actually bring the Otsuki project back. For now though, we're gonna do a new project. So I'm gonna be figuring out the game as we go. And there's a couple of things in the first episode that are happening that are maybe not the nicest. I noticed that the day-night cycle is on in the first episode and there's some night shots as well. I didn't really look how those turned out, so I turned it off in the later episodes that I've been recording. But, it is what it is. It might just be there in the first episode, but in the later episodes it probably won't be there while I'm actually building something. Also, I'm getting a little bit familiar still with some of the tools in the first episode, so there might be a few moments where I'm placing down roads and I'm not really using the snapping tools properly and stuff like that, and the roads look a little bit janky, and that'll be fixed in the next episodes as I get more familiar with it. So, we're gonna do a start on a fresh map, and we're gonna be using the Barrier Island map because of, two reasons. I wanted a map that wasn't too rainy in terms of the climate. I just don't really like how the rainy days look in the game. At least not at the moment. Maybe they'll improve in the future, but for now, I don't really like how the rainy days look. Especially on the maps where it has a more of a rainy climate, it rains a lot. And I just like the sunny look a lot more. So that's one reason. And the other reason is the Barrier Island map has no snowy winters. Which is also pretty nice because I don't really like the look of the snowy winters at the moment. Which also has to do with the fact that a lot of the buildings, I think, don't get, snow on the roofs, and, cars don't necessarily get snow. Maybe they do at this point, but there's just... I just think it looks too white and too... it doesn't look nice. So, I decided to go for a map that does not have a snowy winter, and that has a little bit more of a hotter climate. Also, the map Barrier Island. For some reason, this island in front of the mainland, in front of the coastline, gave me some ideas of things that we could do with it. Even though it's not necessarily the same kind of look in terms of the land, I do think that we could achieve something that has a little bit of inspiration from Manhattan in New York, with quite a build-up urban area on that island, with a nice rectangle shaped central park that will decorate and put some nice things in. And then we have the mainland area where we also have quite a bit of build area. So there's a lot of options to build maybe even 2 cities. One on the island and then one on the mainland. Or maybe that'll be part of the same city and it's just going to be 2 districts of the same city. I think it's a nice looking map and I think it has a lot of potential. So that's what we're going to be using, and let's get into it. So, how does the game actually run? Well, I was actually pleasantly surprised. When I saw the game was released, I saw online that a lot of people were complaining about the performance of the game, and it got me scared, honestly. So when I bought the game and installed it, I was kind of scared of how it was gonna run, especially because I don't have the newest graphics card. My computer itself is pretty good. I have 64GB of RAM, I've got an i7-7820X, so that's a relatively decent CPU, but I have a GTX 1060, so that's an old graphics card that only has 6GB of VRAM, so yeah, I was a little bit scared that that GPU was not going to be able to handle this game properly. Now, granted, it did have some issues with the performance, it did have some frame rate issues when I first launched the game, so that did got me scared, but after a few tweaks, it actually ran pretty well. So there were a couple of things I turned off. I think I turned motion blur down to low, and I turned off the volumetric clouds. So the volumetric clouds just looked really bad. I'll try and input like a little piece of it in the video here. When I zoomed out and when the camera zoomed out above the clouds and you looked at the clouds from above, if I would then move the camera around, the clouds would just duplicate themselves and then slowly dissipate, slowly fade away, and it just looked really bad. So I was like, yeah, let's just turn those clouds off. But luckily I saw that there's actually 2 layers of clouds. So you've got the volumetric clouds, which are the clouds that are lower to the ground, and then there's also distance clouds, I believe they're called, which are a lot higher up in the sky. So you can turn those both on and off individually. So I left the distance clouds on, so there's still some clouds high up in the sky, so it doesn't look like a complete blue sky. But the low-hanging clouds are gone until they fix that issue with the clouds just duplicating themselves and not looking really good. So I also took down the level of detail to medium, I believe, from like the high setting, and those couple of changes made such a big difference to the frame rate. Now there was one other thing as well that I noticed. By default the game runs in full screen mode, but for some reason when I ran it in full screen mode it would stutter every now and then a little bit. But when I run it in full screen windowed mode, it actually runs really good, and there's no stutters, or at least a lot less. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with when I changed it to full screen windowed mode that it just runs a lot better. So for now I'm using that, and with that said, I actually think the game runs pretty good. So yeah, we're gonna build a US city. Now, why a US city? This is gonna be my first real complaint about the new game. So the one thing and I think a lot of people with me as well, really hoped that they would tackle with the new game was the issue with how the game chooses the lot sizes and like how the game assigns like buildings to lots and stuff like that. So the game works with this system with little cells, which are like little square-shaped cells on the map, and these are, you know, and these make up your zone. So a zone can be like 5 cells by 4 cells, for instance, something like that, or 2 by 2. And those will then be buildings, so they will always be rectangular or square-shaped lots. And that's fine, but most cities don't have perfectly rectangular-shaped grids. A lot of cities, especially in Europe, have very organic street patterns. And when you then look at those cities, you can see that the buildings are still wall-to-wall. There's no space between the buildings, and a lot of times the buildings will have been built in the shape that fits the lot. So if there's a triangular shaped lot, or if the lot is just like a little bit narrower on one side, then the buildings are probably gonna be built to fit that shape. And that is something that the first game was really plagued by, that there was no irregular shaped lots. It was always square or rectangle. And as soon as you moved away from like a grid shaped sort of like road pattern, you would have these weird gaps in between buildings. You would have these weird gaps in between the roads and buildings. And you would have to try and make it work with like detailing. But vanilla, you couldn't really make it look realistic because you couldn't as soon as you moved away from like the perfect grid, you wouldn't be able to make your buildings wall to wall, basically. But when you look at a European city, most of the buildings are wall to wall. There's no space, and it's very densely populated, so the buildings need to be that. You need to use space optimally, right? And the same thing goes for Japanese cities. Like if we look at a Japanese city such as Tokyo, the space is so well optimized that, you know, it's just not possible with the current state of the game. And also wasn't possible in City Skylines 1. So that's something that we really hope that they would fix with this new game. But I'm really, well, it's kind of sad to see that they didn't. And that we're still dealing with these, well, with this same system, basically. So for that reason, I opted to do a US city, because US cities are more grid-based, so it's easier to do, and we can actually get used to the new tools a little bit better. But yeah, also because it just doesn't look right if we do a European city and we have all these gaps in between the buildings. So yeah, I don't think the game is necessarily catered to build European cities. That's just what I think. At least not vanilla. Now, as soon as we get things in the future like mods, that will improve and we will be able to make it look a little bit better and more realistic. But right now, I don't think so. So that's why I went for a US style city. Even though I personally don't know a lot about US cities. So, there are a lot of things I really like though about the new game. I really like that the buildings have a longer build time, for instance. That you don't just click and a building spawns right away. No, it takes a bit of time for buildings to build, which is nice. The special buildings with their upgrade system, I really like that you can upgrade the building, and sometimes the upgrade will be within the footprint of the building, but other times there will be an extension added to the building, which might mean that you have to sort of like, you know, redo or reconvert some area, a block of the city to make space for that, which is nice. So that's a really cool thing. I also really like the new specialized industry tool. Much better than using the old brush tool that we had, which was really difficult to work with. You couldn't really get really detailed with that brush. The new industry tool is much easier because you just click points and it just fills the area in between the points with farmland or landfill or something else. And that's just much easier to work with. I really like that. I really think that's a really cool way of doing that, and it's much better. Mixed zoning. As a European, we have mixed zoning everywhere. I live in a small village outside of a big city. Actually, my village is encircled by the city on all sides. But even in my small village, we have mixed zoning. There's apartment buildings on top of the local supermarket. But not having mixed zoning in the first game was really something that a lot of people missed, and me as well. Mixed zoning and just having that in the game as like an actual feature is just so much nicer, because it makes things a lot more realistic. Because in a lot of places, both in Europe but also in the US and even in like Japan as well, a lot of places will have mixed zoning. The new road tools. Yeah, we can't really forget about that, right? So the old game, you were dealing with the node and segment based system, which was fine but also had its own limitations. And for a lot of the things that people wanted to do with like highway interchanges and like interesting road layouts, you just couldn't really do it without mods with like the old game. So the new road tools are so much better. Now you can actually hook up to a specific lane of a road. You can shift the road from side to side. There's so much options here that are just a lot better and just make the whole thing a lot more easier to work with. So yeah, I'm really happy with how that works. So I think from here on out, the potential for the future is so good. The graphics are better than City Skylines 1. It seems to run relatively good after you've changed a couple of things. And I think that's a much better starting point for the modders to start working from than City Skylines 1 was. So that's also a thing I think a lot of people are maybe a little bit spoiled by at the moment. And that might cloud some people's judgment at the moment. I saw that the game got mixed reviews on Steam, and I saw a bunch of people posted video reviews where they really went in hard on the developers of the game, and I don't condone people calling the developers all kinds of names and shit like that, because I saw some people do that in like video uploads on YouTube already. I think people got really spoiled by what the modding community actually did to City Skylines 1. Because if you take everything away that the modding community added to City Skylines 1, and you look at just vanilla City Skylines 1 and compare that to vanilla City Skylines 2, it's actually a lot better. And when I say compare vanilla to vanilla, I don't mean compare City Skylines 1 with all the DLC that was added over the years and compare that to City Skylines 2 without DLC. No, you need to compare what City Skylines 1 was at launch and compare that to what this game is at launch. And I think we can all agree that this game looks a lot better, and with a lot of the core functionalities improved upon, even though there's some things that weren't improved upon, like the square-shaped lot sizes and all that kind of stuff, I think we are at a much better starting point for the modding community to take this game to a whole nother level from this way forward. So yeah, I'm really curious to see where it's gonna take us when the mods actually do get introduced. Right now there's no official mod support yet. It's gonna be coming in the future, I think probably next year. So it's gonna be cool to see where the modders are actually gonna be able to take this. Talking about the square-shaped lots though, I did see one thing, and that is that the game does have a developer mode. So you can put in a launch option in your Steam launch options for the game, and you can launch the game in the developer mode. And in that developer mode, it actually has something, a tool that allows you to change the shapes of the lots. So it doesn't really change the shape of the building, but what it does, it basically gives you a tool very similar to that new specialized industry tool where you paint where you click points and it fills the area in between the points with a district. That tool is also in the developer mode for changing the shape of the lots. Now, it doesn't change the actual building, like I said, but it changes the ground texture of the building, and it changes that to a different shape, for instance. So if you have gaps in between buildings, you could at least fill in that grass there with the same texture that the buildings right next to it have. Or if the texture of a building, of the surface, like the pavement or something, doesn't extend all the way up to the road because it's a little bit of a weird angle, you can drag it out with that tool. And with that tool, you can also put in like extra pieces of surface, so extra pieces of grass and stuff like that, so it could be nice for detailing. Now, that tool is only available in the developer mode of the game though, so what I hope is that this tool can at some point be ported to like a mod or something, so that we could have access to that in-game without having to go into the developer mode. That would be really nice, if we could at least add like the extra surfaces to fill in the gaps, and then if we get mods for like other things that we need, so a couple of mods that I'm missing. Anarchy mods would be really helpful, because if you have anarchy mods, you can basically clip buildings into each other, so then you can basically make the weird angles work. You can at least, well, you'll have to choose. Either you're gonna have gaps between your buildings, or you clip the buildings into each other so that you don't have a gap. I would opt for the last one. Would always look better than when you have these weird gaps in between buildings. So that would be nice if we have an anarchy mod, and then obviously we're gonna need some kind of a move it mod to go along with that, otherwise you're not gonna be able to move all these buildings into each other, so that's gonna be another mod that I definitely would need. And I guess as more content will be added, Find It would definitely be something that we need. In the developer mode there is a tool that is a little bit reminiscent of the old Find It mod. Basically just a tool that allows you to search through all of the different things in the game and just choose something and place it down. So We're gonna have to see what is gonna be possible with the modding community, but with seeing what is in the developer mode of the game, I do hope that some of these things could be ported into an actual mod that we can later use in-game. That would actually be pretty cool. I hope that they've actually thought about doing it that way, and that is why it's there, that they've already added these functionalities in there so that when the modding community does get started, we do have the option to bring these into the game for the people who actually want that stuff. Yeah, I think it could be cool. I'm not sure what is possible. Like, take everything what I say right now with a grain of salt, because I'm not a modder. I don't really know. I made a couple of assets, but that's only it. I don't know anything about making mods. So, yeah, I just hope that this is going to be a good starting point for the modding community to start from. So, what are the goals for this city? Well, I actually just want to play the game. Like, when I got into City Skylines, and I should probably say this, when I got into City Skylines 1, I got into playing the game with the intention of building Japanese realistic looking cities. Now, I could not do that with vanilla City Skylines, so when I was downloading the first game, or when I was downloading the City Skylines 1 for the first time, I was already looking into which mods I needed to achieve what I wanted to do. I had already downloaded a whole bunch of new Japanese assets that I would need. So I had never played vanilla City Skylines 1. The goals for the city, I guess it's just actually playing the game as how it's intended. Using all the services, making everything run, and I guess make the city turn a profit. That would be a nice goal to have. And I guess that could get me into the game properly, and then when the whole modding thing starts, that would also, it makes things easier for me as well. I probably wouldn't have to figure everything out like I did with City Skylines 1. Probably wasn't the best thing to do, to get into a game and straight away play heavily modded and never play the game vanilla. But, maybe me playing vanilla now might actually make that a little bit easier in the future for me to figure stuff out. So, yeah, that's also some other reason, but I just want to play this new game and see what it's all about. So, I'm gonna be uploading when I feel like it. One issue with the old Atsuki save was that because it was so heavily modded, I was using like 200 mods or something like that, and then something like 10,000 assets. There are so much things that can go wrong and that can break. And every time I took a little break or a longer break, didn't really matter. If there was one little update to the game, a lot of the mods would break, and I would then have to backtrack and figure out what had broken and what I needed to update, or sometimes I would have to get rid of a mod, or it was always a pain in the ass to get a save game back up and running again. Sometimes I would get the urge to play the game and be like, oh, I want to play the game and make an episode. But then it just wouldn't load, and I would have to spend like a whole afternoon trying to fix it, and then by the time I would finally be back into my save game, I would have lost interest, and I would be like, you know what, I just want to make music. And I would just go make music again, right? So, playing with no mods and playing fully vanilla, when I want to play the game, I can just launch it, record an episode, edit it, and upload it. And it should be a lot quicker to do, so I hope I can do a few more episodes than I did with the Atsuki thing, and do a little bit more of a regular thing, but I'm not gonna make any promises, so there won't be a regular upload schedule for now. I'm just gonna upload when I feel like it. So, we're getting near the end of the episode. Now, I'm gonna try and put in some cinematics at the end, even though I'm not too familiar yet with the new camera tool. I'm gonna try and make them look as good as possible, but we also don't have too much of a city built yet, so I cannot really zoom out too far. So yeah, I'm gonna try and include a few little cinematics things at the end, but I wanna ask you some questions, because I don't have a lot of knowledge about US cities. So, I want some inspiration or ideas from all of you. What are things I should include in the future? What are things I should look at? So, I've been looking a little bit for inspiration so far. I've been looking at Manhattan in New York, and I've also been looking at the city of Chicago. I really like the look of the city of Chicago, so I've been looking at those two places in general for a little bit of inspiration at the moment. But if you have ideas for projects or things that we can do in future episodes, but also ideas for district names or things like that, then please let me know. Or just in general, stuff that is really like something that applies to United States cities. I don't have a lot of knowledge about that, so if you do and you have some ideas, let me know. Now, I also think the city in general, we're gonna have two distinct urban areas on this map. We have this island, and on this island, it's giving me a bit of Manhattan influence kind of vibes. I want to build something with a nice central park, and we're gonna have a good amount of urban development on that island. Maybe some beachfront properties on one area, on one side of it, something like that, even though there's no beaches properly yet in the game, and there's actually a beach DLC coming, so I'm curious to see what's possible with that, and maybe we'll add that when that DLC is out. But there's also the mainland, and on the mainland there's also quite a bit of flat area, so I think there might even be like two cities, or maybe it'll be two areas of the same city, and we'll just have an east and west part. But maybe they'll have a completely different name, and one will be called Grayham, because that's the name of the city that I came up with. But maybe one area will be Grayham and the other area will be called something different, and then the whole map is just a Grayham metropolitan area, or something like that. Let me know. If you have any ideas or things that you want to see me do, or want to see me take inspiration from, put it in the comments below. And that's it for now. Without further ado, I hope to see you all in the next one.